On this Tuesday night, Ashley Parker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House bureau chief for The Washington Post, Sam Stein, veteran journalist who is now White House editor over at Politico, and Barbara McQuaid, a veteran federal prosecutor, former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, worked with DOJ during the Biden transition, a professor currently at her alma mater, University of Michigan Law School, which, Barbara, is why I would like to begin with you. Let's talk about Mr. Tom Barrack. He's an interesting character among various other claims to fame. He bought Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch in California, but tonight he's in trouble. You've read the indictment. What stands out to you in the document?
Well, Brian, it's what I would refer to as a speaking indictment, in that the allegations are very detailed. And so this is not some vague allegation that just parrots the language of the statute. It quotes from email messages where it talks about how Tom Barrack was acting under the direction and control of foreign officials in the UAE. As you said, he inserted parts of their suggestions into a Trump campaign speech. He took credit for getting the UAE excluded from the Trump travel ban in 2017. He wrote an op-ed for a national publication with UAE input, and he agreed to advocate for the appointment of individuals in the Trump administration at their recommendation, including a U.S. congressman. I think, Brian, sometimes people dismiss charges under these statutes as mere regulatory offenses, paperwork errors, but that's not what this allegation is at all. It is alleging that Tom Barrack acted as a secret agent on behalf of the UAE, and that he betrayed the United States and he betrayed President Donald Trump.
To your point, Barb, we've also had cause over these past 5 years to forget that there are rules governing each and every act by government employees, ideally. Ashley Parker, I want to play for you John Bolton on CNN tonight. We'll discuss on the other side.
Trump's propensity, and it began during the transition, I think that's been pretty clearly documented, to ignore normal channels, to have friends, members of his family engage with foreign governments.
Ashley, you're among the living experts on Donald Trump and the Trump administration. Does that square with your reporting?
Absolutely. And that was actually one of the first things when I was struck by when I saw the indictment and read the news, is just how easy it would be for someone like Tom Barrack or anyone really to get in the president's orbit and influence him in major ways. You could see in another administration, someone else not disclosing their lobbying ties, trying to do the same things. But there's a internal NSC structure. There's a traditional way that meetings are held and policies are debated, and it would be hard for them to get as far as Tom Barrack allegedly did, inserting language in a speech and influencing the president in other ways. But this is a president where the last person to talk to him, who called his personal cell phone late at night, somebody who stopped by the White House unannounced, got waved in by a friend, ended up in the Oval Office, could put a news story or a tweet in front of the president and absolutely change the direction of policy. And one person, when I was covering the Trump White House, remarked to me, look, President Trump goes around the room and he peppers everyone with questions. And Lara Trump, that's the wife of his son, Eric, could be sitting there, this person said, with her sorority sisters, and he's likely to ask them a question of what they think he should do on some issue of foreign policy, and just as likely to take their advice as his actual foreign policy advisor. So what you have here, and what Bolton was alluding to, is kind of a perfect storm for this to happen in the Trump West Wing.
Sam Stein, aside from being a living reminder of the grift that everyone just survived, is there a central feature of the Tom Barrack story that stands out to you?
Well, it's what Ashley talked about, which was here was a president without any firm ideology, for whom, access, money, and political instincts were the overriding principles. You could be someone like Tom Barrack, who really has limited foreign policy experience beyond the business community, and influence the president's Middle East policy because you were the last person to talk to him. The other thing, though, is that there was just so many people who were being paid by different varying interests, in some cases foreign governments, who had access to Trump. I mean, it was sort of the Wild West of ethics here. But, keep in mind that Michael Flynn was also a foreign agent at the time of the transition, paid for by the Turkish government. So it was almost like a foreign policy for purchase early in the Trump years. And it's a little bit scary as a proposition. Now, of course, we have to concede Tom Barrack is pleading non-guilty to this, so the charges have not been proven. But if they are proven, I mean, the proposition here is pretty scary that you could have for a few $1 billion, which is what it looks like the UAE put into his accounts, a abrupt shift in Middle Eastern policy, an ending of alliances with Qatar, and then suddenly a presidential and administration taking a completely different approach in Middle Eastern affairs with limited insight into why or what the actual end game will be, and all because of money.
Someday we may get the answer as to why the Trump administration didn't seem that concerned over the murder of one of Ashley's colleagues at the Post, Mr. Khashoggi, at the hands of the Saudis. But these are questions, I guess, for another time. Barbara, back to your legal expertise, back to the document. Does it read to you, as indictments go, like there's more to come?
Well, it does, only in that it names by label and category some additional individuals. It talks, for example, about this congressman who was recommended by the UAE for an ambassador position. It talks about executives who were working at the company that was run by Tom Barrack. And so sometimes when you have references to others who are not yet charged, it could mean that additional charges are coming. Of course, there's always the possibility, if I were representing Tom Barrack, my first call would be to the prosecutor to say, is there any way we can work out a deal where my client would cooperate? And so being a close advisor to Donald Trump and someone who's in his close orbit, as a prosecutor, I'd be very interested in exploring anything that Tom Barrack might have to say about that.
Ashley, change of subject. I have another one for you. I'm going to play for you parts of the clash today, now famous, between Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci.